Documentation: Crude oil in abundance.
In
In 160 years of oil production history, we have been told countless times that oil will soon run out, only to have a new date for peak oil, a maximum in time of the world production rate, to be set shortly afterwards. How can one be wrong so often? Or does oil renew itself? Experts such as the best-selling author Hans-Joachim Zillmer and geographer Professor Werner Kirstein go even further. In their opinion, the propagated depletion of reserves is only used to artificially increase oil prices with the argument of scarcity. Their conclusion is explained in this documentation. Let us first explain the importance of oil for all of us humans. Since the beginning of the industrial oil production in 1859, a fundamental structural change took place in Europe, which can be seen as the base to our present wealth. Crude oil has been used as a fuel for machines and has since provided mobility, heat, and electricity. As a raw material, it is used to manufacture countless products that have become indispensable in our lives, such as plastics, paints, and fertilizers. While in 1945 the global oil consumption was 6 million barrels, 159 liters, per day, it reached 88 million barrels by 2012, which is the equivalent to 44 supertankers per day. Oil is the most important source of energy and the foundation of the global economy. An adequate supply of crude oil is of paramount importance for mankind. While in the 1960s a barrel of crude oil cost about $2 and was still available for $10 in 1999, it increased to a maximum of $148 in 2008. The important question arises: what caused this huge price increase? Because high oil prices have negative impact on the global economy and ultimately burden every single person. Oil crisis despite too much oil?
According to the studies of the historian Dr. Rüdiger Graf, oil was a cheap and seemingly an infinitely available energy source until about 1970. This changed with the oil crisis in 1973, when the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, claimed their national production rights and wanted to force higher prices from the international oil companies. By reducing production volumes, pressure was exerted on the highly oil-dependent global economy. Prices went up and fuel became scarce. As a result, there were car-free Sundays and empty interstate highways. Since then, the price of oil has never fallen back to the former level. There have been repeated warnings that we must reduce oil consumption. But why? In reality, however, production volumes have risen continuously from 0.3 million tons in 1861 to 4,630 million tons in 2018. According to Dr. Rüdiger Graf, there is no reason to assume that the accessibility of this important resource will end soon. The end of it would only be purposely triggered politically and economically. He literally said,
"The problem is not that we have too little oil. The problem has always been and will always be that we have too much oil." Textbook theory on oil formation based on thin foundation.
School and university textbooks, like the biology book of the perfs, are teaching the fossil origin of petroleum. There's very little knowledge about what this theory is based on. The Nexus magazine writes, in 1757, the Russian geoscientist Mikhail Lomonosov was the first to claim that oil was of fossil origin. His assumption, based on his own observations and the scarce scientific knowledge at the time, was:
Crude oil is generated from tiny bodies of animals embedded in sediments under enormous pressure and high temperatures over incredibly long periods of time.
2.5 centuries later, Lomonosov's assumption has almost the importance of an ideology. But has it now been experimentally validated? Not at all. We can read in the Wall Street Journal.
Although mankind has been drilling to find oil for generations, little is known about the origin of the sediments, nor about their formation processes within the earth. The non-biological petroleum production.
The little-known abiotic theory of the origin of oil and gas has already been mentioned in several historical Brockhaus Encyclopedia editions as a possible variant. Abiotic or abiogen means that no living organisms are involved in the formation. This theory assumes, in contrast to fossil oil formation, that hydrocarbons such as methane are formed inside many celestial bodies from the amalgamation of carbon and other elements. Methane is the main component of natural gas and a precursor of crude oil. In several scenarios, methane could simply be obtained experimentally from rocks. For this purpose, the rocks were exposed to conditions such as those prevailing in the Earth's mantle. On the other hand, it was not possible to produce oil from plant and animal material in the laboratory that would resemble naturally occurring crude oil. Scientific experiments therefore prove that hydrocarbons can be formed by abiotic reactions. In contrast, according to Professor Werner Kirstein, there is still no proof of biotic or fossil formation.
Natural gas in abundance. Surprisingly, methane has been found all over the seabed. According to Hans-Joachim Zillmer, such gas leaks are mostly found at all fracture edges of the continental plates. They are found in about 1,600 mud volcanoes on land and in countless large holes and craters all over the seabed. For example, the North Sea floor is also littered with methane craters. Methane escapes from all possible locations around the world and is available in abundance. Therefore, there is no scarcity. Methane detected in space. Methane was also detected spectroscopically on Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto through space radiation investigation. Saturn's moon Titan is particularly striking as huge liquid methane lakes were found on its surface. Methane seems to be widespread in the universe. According to scientists, however, none of the celestial bodies mentioned had any flora or fauna that could explain a biotic, hence fossil origin of methane. So where does the methane on this planet come from? Oil fields regenerating themselves.
Can oil fields regenerate? Yes, according to the latest analysis, this is possible, and it happens quite often, as Professor Kirstein states. Crude oil can rise from great depths and replenish already exploited deposits. The fact that it is new oil can be proven in the laboratory. The newly emerged oil has a different signature than the previous one, and other microbes are living in it. If crude oil were biotically produced, it would have been produced from dead organisms at a certain point in time. However, the observed refilling of the deposits is much more likely to be explained by continuous abiotic production in the Earth's core.
Why are microbes found in crude oil?
There are countless dead microbes and bacteria found in crude oil. According to popular theory, this is enough evidence that crude oil must have had a biological origin. But what would be the outcome if these microorganisms were to live at a depth of several kilometers where the oil deposits are present? What if they die simply because of the difference in pressure during oil production, because they cannot resist it? This was the idea of the astrophysicist Professor Gold and other scientists later. In order to obtain confirmation of his theory, he made an experiment. He used a pressure vessel to extract fresh oil from the depths and examined it in the laboratory. And what did he find there? Living microbes and bacteria never seen before. He took this as proof that microbes and bacteria live in and from oil, because it is the base of their life, and not that oil is created from them.
Extremely deep extraction sites contradict the fossil origin theory.
In the Gulf of Mexico, oil was found 5,600 meters below the seabed and 10,500 meters below the surface. Fossil formation is impossible at this depth. According to Professor Kirstein, the oil would not be stable at this depth if it had been produced by fossil fuels because of the high pressure and temperature.
Hans-Joachim Zillmer concludes, if the theory on the abiotic origin of crude oil and natural gas were correct, the geopolitical and economic effects would be hardly foreseeable. Wars over oil would be obsolete, and the high prices would fall. In short, all of humanity would be better off, provided that humanity is informed and the oil is made available. But why do school and university textbooks still teach the fossil origin of oil? Could it be that it is not in the interest of certain people or circles to let humanity know that oil, and thus energy, is available without limit?
Hey, stell dir vor, ich habe gehört, die Menschen denken, Erdöl ist entstanden, weil viele unserer Vorfahren vor Millionen von Jahren gestorben sind. Wirklich? Nicht zu fassen. Wenn die wüssten, dass wir von Erdöl leben, dann würde sich ja ihr ganzes Weltbild ändern.